Hello, this is a recording of Lesson 1A, Introduction to Engineering Career Fields, Ethics, and Professionalism. Our objectives are to define what an engineer is and does, explore various engineering careers, understand how engineering success and failures impact the world around you, and define ethics and professionalism and explain their importance. You have already done the bell ringer. What do you think of when you hear the term engineer? And what do you think an engineer does? Do you know an engineer, or have you heard of a famous engineer? If so, tell a little bit about him or her. You have probably heard of STEM by this point, but what is STEM and how do engineers fit into it? Although engineering has its own category, it is really the piece of the puzzle that brings all the others together under one umbrella. Here are some quotes or statements about STEM. The best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. Scientists work with the natural world. Technology is used to make math, science, or engineering easier, faster, or less expensive. Mathematicians use algorithms to solve complex problems, but engineers use technology, math, and science to solve problems. So here are some quotes from some famous people. We'll give you a moment to take a look at them. So let's continue. What is engineering? Engineering can be called the discipline, art, skill, and profession of acquiring and applying scientific, mathematical, economic, social, and practical knowledge in order to design and build structures, machines, devices, systems, materials, and processes that safely realize improvements to the lives of people. Pre-engineering will use knowledge to solve problems and to improve lives in society. Now let's spend about 5 minutes discussing with your classmates what you think engineers do. Then you will share your findings. So researchers and engineers do all of these different activities. Notice that two of them, invent and innovate, have a square around them. What is the difference in innovate and invent? When you invent, it means that you come up with something completely new, whereas innovate means to take something that's already exists and make it better. Here is a picture showing you an example of this. This is a wheel that was created many, many years ago. In fact, it was from 3150 BC. It was a new idea. And here we see a wheel on a folding bicycle. It has been innovated. The US government keeps statistics on 17 engineering disciplines. At LSU, the College of Engineering has many different engineering majors and minors. Here's a list of some of them. Looking at some of the broader areas of engineering, we can see that there's biological engineering that deals with engineering principles and applying them to living organisms and systems. Civil engineering, which deals with infrastructure systems. Chemical engineering, which deals with creating chemical and biochemical processes. Electrical engineers that design products and systems that use electricity. Computer science, where we learn the math and theory behind computing and develop and hone programming skills and then use computers to solve problems in any industry. construction management, which oversees the entire construction process, environmental engineering, which tries to address environmental challenges, mechanical engineering, which is to design, analyze, manufacture, and maintain machines, industrial engineering, which is to improve any type of system, and petroleum engineering to produce natural gas and oil resources that make our lives possible. If you become an engineer, there are many different things that you might go into. You might become a manager or a leader at a business. You might make your own business and become an entrepreneur. You might work for the military. You might do engineering and social service abroad. You might become a teacher or professor or a graduate and do research. You could even do a mix of all of the above. How does engineering impact society? Well, sometimes your engineering solutions work. Here are two examples. For example, the internet that was developed and a dam that was built. Electricity gets taken to many different places across our world. And here's an example of an area where they utilized engineering to be able to develop an island. Of course, sometimes engineering does not work. And we have to be careful whenever we are doing engineering to make sure and think through our solutions. Here's another example of engineering that didn't work. The levee in 2005 in New Orleans and the nuclear disaster of 2011. So the work of engineering is very important. Now let's talk a little bit about engineering and ethics. Here is the second bell ringer. What is one field of engineering that interests you and what can you do in that field? Think about the ones that you just saw in the last part of the presentation. Next, let's talk about what you think professionalism is. What is professionalism? Now, what is ethics? And how do you know if a decision you make is an ethical one? Whenever we have a lapse in adhering to ethics, it can be detrimental to a company and its workers. Leadwell identifies phrases that might signal that there's an ethical lapse. No one will even notice. Technically, this isn't illegal. I'm counting on your loyalty. It may not seem like, but this is really for the best. I'm not telling you to do this, but this goes no further than this room. All of those are phrases that might indicate something unethical is about to happen. Professionalism is being honest, being polite and courteous towards others, being punctual or on time and rarely missing work, being committed to working hard in a safe manner and not being lazy in your efforts, being responsible for your actions, being friendly and open to criticism so that you can become better, having the ability to communicate effectively, and being sensitive to others and their cultures. Professionalism is a trait that is really required for engineers of the 21st century. Employers want new workers to be responsible, ethical, and team-oriented, and to possess these strong communication, interpersonal, and problem-solving skills. If you wrap those all together, you get professionalism. So what are some examples of professionalism? Well, It's when you're acting in a professional way on a job or in any activity in your life. Is it considered to be professional when you turn in your work on time, whether you're at a business or in your school? Is it professional to do your chores at home? Is it professional to get to school on time? Yes, all of these things show professionalism. Now let's talk a little bit about ethics. Ethics is hugely important in life as well as in engineering. Sometimes your decisions can make a difference in life or death. Did you cut corners in your design, which could lead to a deadly accident when you were doing engineering? The 21st century engineer needs to have a strong moral compass. There are three levels of ethics to consider: universal ethics, personal ethics, and professional. But they all essentially boil down to ways of looking at ethics. Universal morals or ethics are fundamental beliefs that are true regardless of your culture or your personal view, like stealing, lying, harming, or murdering others are wrong. Personal morals or ethics is how a universal moral is interpreted and used by a person. Some people might think that a white lie is okay, whereas others would not stand for that. Some people might feel that stealing from the rich to give to the poor is okay, whereas others wouldn't. What if somebody was in a vegetative state from a injury? Is it wrong to let them go? Uh, or is it a quality of life concern? You may have heard of doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Professional or engineering ethics is a formal standard or code that guides a person who is doing work activities and decision making. This can vary from discipline to discipline. For instance, HIPAA is what doctors use when they are dealing with their patients. It is the code that they follow. All disciplines have formal codes of ethics. The National Society of Professional Engineers maintains a code specifically for those engineers, and many engineering professional societies have their own code. Ethics can definitely get tricky. For example, think of a self driving car that is crashing at 50 miles per hour on a sidewalk full of pedestrians. Should the vehicle crash and kill the driver, but avoid the pedestrians? Or should it save the driver, but kill 10 pedestrians? In engineering economy, it could make sense to build a high rise on a beautiful property, but what if it forces 15 people to move and kills all the wildlife and vegetation? We are forced with ethical questions all the time, and our personal and professional ethics guide us through the decision making process. Your decision is ethical if it is consistent with the generally accepted codes of conduct, it is consistent with your personal moral principles, and it is consistent with your professional moral principles. Have you ever been asked to do something unethical? Have you seen somebody do something unethical? How did it make you feel? Would you want to work with or for somebody that you saw being unethical? There are steps for ethical decision making. When you are doing making a decision, you should identify the issue, identify who's being affected, analyze what sort of courses of actions can be taken and their consequences of each one of those actions, consider the character and intent of the stakeholder, come up with a decision, and then act on it. Let's give you an example of one. Your best friend Kiera is normally an A student, but has recently gotten several Fs in her classes. She has had several problems at home with her family, and her mother has just gotten a new job. Because of the situation, she hasn't been able to study in her normal, rigorous way, and she really needs to get an A on her final exam in English so she can pass that class. If she doesn't pass, then she will have to attend and pass summer school or flunk for the year. She hasn't studied much and asked to copy off you during the test. What should you do? Well, based upon our steps, the first thing you need to do is identify the issues. First off, cheating is wrong. That's an issue. Second, Sally does need help. And third, this grade could change her ability to pass. Who is being affected by this? Well, you and Sally would be. But if you think even further, your parents, her parents, the school itself, your classmates around you, and your teacher are other stakeholders. Step 3 says to analyze alternative courses of action, taking into consideration the consequences of them. So, if you let the cheat, what happens? Well, if you're caught, you could get in trouble, get a bad grade. And if you don't get caught, you'd have a guilty conscience about cheating. Sally, she would be cheating to be able to get ahead, and she'd have to deal with that. Your parents would deal with the consequences if you get caught. Your school would have to deal with disciplinary options if you were caught. Your classmates might treat you differently because you're a cheater. Your teacher would be disappointed in your behavior. Are there any other consequences that you could think of for that if you allowed her to cheat? What if you don't let her cheat? Well, you might feel bad for not helping a friend out, and Sally might fail and have to go to summer school or be retrained for the year. Your parents would be proud of you for making an ethical decision, and your school would be proud of you for making an ethical decision. And you could possibly help Sally out in other ways, like providing extra tutoring or extended time. Your classmates would treat you differently because you didn't help out a friend during a tough time, but others might be proud of you for making that ethical decision. Your teacher would be proud of you, and she could help Sally out. Are there any other consequences to the idea of not letting her cheat? Some other things to consider. Self-interest. It is not in your self-interest to help her cheat because you might get caught, but it is in your self-interest to maintain your long friendship with Sally. Honesty. It would be dishonest to let her cheat. Justice. She's had a really difficult time, so it would not necessarily be just or fair to punish her for circumstances that are outside of her control. It's also not fair for her to pass a test by cheating. Take a look at their character and intent, which is step 4. You're both well-meaning students and you feel bad for Sally's predicament. The intent is just to try to help Sally through this hard time. Now you have to decide and make a decision. Step 5. Remember your moral compass. Look at the different courses of action and determine which is the best course of action for you to take. Remember that making the ethical choice is not always the easy choice. Ethics is rarely black and white, which is why it's so important to work every day towards having a strong moral and ethical compass to guide you in making the right choice in tough situations. A good rule of thumb is, if your actions were published on the front page of the newspaper or on the internet tomorrow, would your family be proud or ashamed? That's usually a good gut check. Finally, you have to do step 6, acting on your decision. If you can't act on a decision, you might as well have not done any of this. Acting and reflecting is one of the most important parts of an ethical decision-making process. Whatever choice you make, whether the ethical or unethical one, you will have to live with the consequences. This completes Lesson 1